Let's get into Joseph Cryer here. One of the probably best guys in terms of looking at the tape and seeing that nasty that you want to see out of an offensive lineman. You mentioned he had been committed to Ole Miss in June. LSU stayed in touch with him, though, and was letting him know, hey, you're on our board. We're working through things. And, Brad Davis eventually delivered that offer, and it didn't take long. And he made no secret about it. And we touched on that, and you did in the behind the scenes for our subscribers at thebengaltiger.com. He jumped on it right away. He was, telling us, all right, flips on, but hold on. All right, I got to visit LSU still. I got to visit Ole Miss one more time and see just to make sure. But I'm telling you, it's probably going to happen. It's probably going to happen. Lo and behold, Monday came. He had visited LSU Thursday. He went to Ole Miss on Friday. But the flip was in, and LSU landed Joseph Cryer, 6'4", 290 pounds, probably pushing 300, really. And I think he's somebody that is going to be a one of those guys who you look at in tight quarters along the interior of the offensive line, and just that's where you need that nasty. And sometimes these kind of mid 3-star guys end up being multi-year starters. You had a really good comp for him after you watched the tape on him when you were talking about him on the site, Shea. This is somebody that, just because he's sitting there with that, 85-ish grade on the On3 industry ranking, you think he could develop into something pretty nice for LSU.
Yeah, I think I look at a guy like Joseph Cryer and I go back to thinking about another guy out of North Louisiana, at least coming out of West Monroe. Now, Will Blackwell was a highly ranked player, and he was a defensive lineman, switched over, played some offensive line, but didn't get drafted. But he also started multiple years and became an all SEC player and was a really key piece to multiple teams that he was on. Billy, I think we look at Cryer. He obviously wanted to be at LSU all the way. He said that LSU stayed on him, which you've got to do. Even if you don't have an offer yet, you're recruiting everybody in the state, making sure that when you do make that offer, if it's early, in the middle of kind of where kids' recruiting process, or at the end, closer to signing day, that you're not coming in blind, that you have relationships, that you've talked to them. And Cryer told us at On3 that he's been talking to Kelly for a long time now about being a center. And because of that, he's been doing a lot of center work on the side, snapping nonstop. But what you're getting with him, if you haven't checked out his tape, go to the Bengal Tiger. Billy's got it up there. You can watch or go to his profile if you want to. Joseph Cryer at On3. Scroll down and you'll find his film. He moves people, Billy. And when Cody Blair did kind of a breakdown on what type of player LSU's getting in Cryer, within the first sentence, the first few words, ass kicker was used. And I think this is a kid who, hat on a hat, he is one of the most physical offensive linemen in this class.
Yeah, and I think when you look at what Brad Davis has assembled, you have a guy who's high upside with Ori Williams, who's continuing to work on his technique and improve that. You've got Ethan Callaway, who's only been playing football a few years. He's scratching the surface. You have Kyrie Lee, who's dropped a bunch of weight and is looking like a guy who could eventually start for you at LSU along the interior as well. Now you add Cryer, who's a little bit more of that, kind of polished, at least physically, kind of ready to go prospect. I mean, if you look at the picture that on one of the stories that we had, him standing next to Brian Kelly, well, that picture is from way back in the spring. He's already added a lot more size and weight, just getting ready for that senior year. He is one of those prospects that you don't really want to cross in the middle. I don't think he's necessarily going to play right away just because of the way Brad Davis has recruited along the interior, but he is physically ready enough to do that if he needs to. I think he's somebody that even as they get him into the weight program, they'll kind of refine that body shape that they want. But having that size and just strength right away, that helps you. He reminds me a little bit kind of like a DJ Chester in the sense that he is physically ready to go. He's not as he's a little bit more nasty than DJ is, at least on tape at the high school level. But both are guys that at least LSU has talked about playing a little bit of center from time to time. So Brad Davis continues to assemble a class that you've got to feel good about overall when it comes to the future of the offensive line. Brad Davis has done that since he got on campus. He's been having them in the mix for heavily recruited guys. He's also landed quite a few of those players. So they're still swinging away at a guy like Blake Ivy, 4-star offensive lineman from Texas. They've got 4 on board right now. That's a great spot to be in. They could get to 5 if they find the right guys.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a guy like Blake Ivy who's still undecided. A&M, LSU are the 2 teams that really have his attention. He's a top 5 interior offensive lineman in the country. But you're right, 4 is a good spot to be in. You don't want to take less than 4 offensive linemen in a recruiting class. They enter, or I should say, leave the summer with 4 committed, and you feel good about the 4 guys: 2 offensive tackles, 2 interior O linemen. You got 2 interior O linemen out of Louisiana. You went to the East Coast for an offensive tackle, and you go into Texas for an offensive tackle. Now, as you noted, if it's the right guy, you go to 5. Blake Ivy, again, LSU, Texas A&M. You look at a guy like Elijah Thurman, who, if you're watching on YouTube, Billy's got his profile up now. He moves very quickly. He did that before I even said anything. Elijah Thurman is ranked by On3 as a top 300 prospect, top 15 interior offensive lineman in the country. And he came to LSU's camp, so Brad Davis had seen him. And even knowing that they were getting 4 commitments kind of out of Cryer, out of Ori Williams, they brought him to the Bayou Splash and offered him. And I was talking to On3, our national director of scouting and rankings, Charles Power, about Thurman, might have been this morning or yesterday, I can't remember, but he was like, look, this dude's legit. I mean, he's got basketball film where he's double-double type of guy. So an athletic kid coming out of Georgia, I think he's one that we have to continue to monitor. And then you could even toss in a name, Billy, like Weston Davis. I know he's committed to A&M, but Brad Davis is still kicking the tires there. They're not going to give up recruiting him until he's signed just because they've been so high on him. He is the number 2 offensive tackle in the country on 3. So I love, as you noted, Brad Davis has already done a good job with the past few classes and how they have put things together. This class is right on par for me with what you need. And with Brian Kelly at the helm and what he did at Notre Dame, turning offensive linemen from high school to college to NFL, guys getting paid a lot of money. I feel very good about the combo of both he and Brad Davis when it comes to what they're doing on the O-line.
Yeah, and another thing about Elijah Thurman, too, I caught up with him after the Bayou Splash. We've got a ton of reactions, double digit. Pretty much, I would say 85% of the guys that went to Bayou Splash, we've got reactions from. But Elijah Thurman raved about his time in Baton Rouge. It was, I believe, the only visit he made that week. And it was a big one, coming out to the Bayou Splash without an offer and leaving with the one. At that point in his recruitment, being a guy who's going into his senior year with a bunch of offers on the table, it's not something you see every day. So the interest is real. LSU is right in the mix for him. I think he's going to maybe trim things down around the start of his senior season, and then he wants to make a decision late in his senior season. And the good thing for LSU, when you're looking at that, is you can keep recruiting him. You can keep recruiting Weston Davis. You can see how the chips fall with Blake Ivy, who we think is going to make a decision before his senior year. And if that's the case, then you can really turn the heat up on a guy like Elijah Thurman, or just keep recruiting Weston Davis and kind of see how things go from there. But yeah, Elijah Thurman was very impressed with LSU. He had a lot of good things to say. So I think he's one you've got to circle. And, another thing that's good with a guy like that, with that timeline, is you can watch how your freshman offensive linemen, start out the year. You can watch how your second year players and just kind of the whole position group is evolving. And maybe you do sit there and say, all right, we have to take 5. We need to upgrade a little bit more. And so that's something that's on the table for them. So kudos to Brad Davis. I think he manages his board just about as well as anybody on the staff.
Yeah, I will correct you on one thing. Thurman did drop into Georgia Tech that week. He is a Georgia kid, though, so he rides over to Atlanta, sees Georgia Tech, probably flew over to LSU or drove from there. But not that's not embarrassing, Billy. What's embarrassing is how I continue to I can't stop thinking about messing up Brett and Bo Bordelon's names. Fun, not so fun story. I did it at camp to Brett's face, I think, and he played it off cool, but it's one thing to do that to twins, and it's another to do it to brothers who are 4 years apart or whatever they are. So I don't know. I'll try to get it right by the time he gets to campus.
And look, we haven't even hit the Colin Simmons portion of the podcast yet, so we're waiting on that.
Hi.
But nonetheless, LSU gets a big commitment physically, literally, in Joseph Cryer out of Louisiana. So he's playing for Jess Curtis his senior year. So I'll be swinging over to Natchitoches Central to watch them play at some point. They've got some good games on the slate. I think they play Captain Shreve. Opelousas, a couple others out there that now are very much on my radar to get to. So big commitment for LSU in Joseph Cryer.